Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Rams Review podcast. The new season is drawing closer, and at last, something has overtaken the appearance of former Rams youngster Harrison Solomon on Love Island in the Derby County news agenda. The Rams are close to two signings on free transfers. Andi Weimann and Danny Batth are set to link up with John Eustace once again, joining from Blackburn Rovers. So who better to speak to than Ryan Hildred from the Arte Labour podcast through the Lancashire Telegraph? Ryan, good to speak to you, mate.
Hi, Jack. How are you? All good, thank you. And yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting week this week, really, with fixtures and so on. And I feel like the rumour mill is getting into full swing now. The window opened again, what, last Monday as we record this, and I think things are starting to build. So yeah, two names heavily linked with Derby, and I think it's really interesting to see Eustace go back into former players here, which is an additional angle that we very don't normally get with these new signing videos. So yeah, first of all, kind of how have they both fared, Danny Batth and Andy Weimann, over the last few years and their time at Blackburn Rovers?
Yeah, really well. We only had them both for a season. So Andi Weimann in particular, just for a season. So I'll start. He hit the ground running straight away. So scored on his debut. And you knew that when we signed him, he was going to be a bit of championship experience for us. You know, that fox in the box. He's been at a few clubs, and when we picked him up, it was like, yeah, this is a good, decent signing from John Eustace. And as I say, getting that goal on his debut was a nice Brucey bonus. It put us 2-1 ourselves, didn't it, in the game on that opening game of the season. And then he obviously put himself into a bit of folklore with our goal of the season away at Burnley. You know, you're immediately going to get yourself high in the fans' esteem if you're scoring at Turf Moor. And yeah, that was goal of the season, won in August. So it could have been a shot from the halfway line against any other club or whatever. It's a goal against Burnley at Turf Moor, so no one's coming close, are they? So, and he really just picked up where he left off in that regard, chipped in with a few goals here and there. Got a really important couple of goals away at Cardiff as well. We'd been on a bit of a dodgy run, and away at Cardiff, just getting that win was really good for us. And he got two in that game. So just always had a knack of being in the right place at the right time and chipping in with goals. It's a shame the way it ended at the end of the season. He's had some knee surgery. Finished, so I think it was 8 games before the season, maybe 10 games before the season finished. So he probably would have finished top scorer if it wasn't for that. But in the end, Yuki Hashi took that. So yeah, it's a shame the way that it's finished in that regard. Danny Batth was someone who just grew in his importance to the team as the season went on. So I think it's fair to say that the season started with probably Hayden Carter and Dom Hyam as the two first choice centre backs, and Danny Batth was probably your experienced head on the bench. But very quickly, Danny Batth got himself into the side. You know, Hayden Carter picked up an injury, for example. And then there was a couple of times where we played 3 at the back. And I think Danny Batth, I think, is going to be the bigger miss of the two for us, because I think the biggest compliment you can give Danny Batth is Dom Hyam just plays completely better when Danny Batth is alongside him. Just having that experienced leader, you know, mid-30s defender who's been around the block, he just breathes confidence into our back line. So when Danny Batth played, invariably, we just looked more solid, more assured, and less likely to concede goals, I would say. So yeah, I'm gutted to see them both leave, but in particular Danny Batth, because I think money can't buy that type of experience in the Championship. And obviously we've had a change of approach now with more foreign signings and things like that. So that for me is a bit of a risk. So I think it'll be a miss for sure.
Yeah, and that's really interesting in the context of what we're hearing this morning, Monday morning, as we've recorded this, around Nat Phillips and his absence for next season. I know Derby were kind of really strongly targeting him. Looks like, according to reports in the papers this morning, he's going to go to West Brom. So, I mean, I've just been doing a little bit of digging and just on kind of base stats, profile wise, I've seen a couple of similar things just in terms of how high their percentiles for clearances and aerial duels per 90 are. And I do think what we're looking at there is somebody to come in and slot in. I think John Eustace will want to play more on the front foot next season than he did towards the end of the season in a dogfight, potentially go to a back four. But I think profile wise, we're seeing, as you say, that kind of experienced defender with Naus to slot in. You've got Matt Clark there, also really quick, Sondre Longos. But he's younger, still developing, still bedding into English football. So perhaps a really good partner for him there. But I think Eustace knows what he's getting, obviously, and I think this is a really reliable pickup for Derby. So yeah, I mean, just talk me through kind of what this means for Blackburn. Just how much will these losses be felt?
Yeah, it's probably going to be something that we won't feel it until we get a few weeks or months into the season because our off field issues, sorry, are well documented. So the owners aren't really spending money right now. The money that we got from selling Adam Wharton, for example, was just used for running costs for the club, and there is a reason that John Eustace ended up at Derby because of that very fact. You know, he wasn't backed and he wasn't loved at the club in that sense. And, he voted with his feet and fair play to him. So the markets that we're operating in right now, as I say, some of the abroad markets where we're trying to find some hidden gems for low wages, low transfer fees, they can work well. Sondre Tronstad, for example, got our player of the season last season, and he fits into that category. UK Ohashi, his first season in Championship football, had a brilliant season for us and got 10 goals. So that approach can work. However, I do think it comes with its risks. For every Sondre Tronstad and Yuki Ohashi that you're picking up, you're probably getting a few duds along the way, players that struggle to adjust, players that aren't to that right quality level. And I just think the Championship gets more competitive season on season, particularly when you've got the likes of Birmingham and Wrexham who are coming up and going strong, and the parachute payment money. I think if you don't keep your squad ticking over with quality, you can find out the hard way. And indeed, Rovers did do that. I've been writing about in a column for the Lancashire Telegraph last week that this reminds me of 10 years ago for Rovers, because we had a great squad that nearly made the playoffs. And the last player sold out of that group was Jordan Rhodes. And we replaced the likes of Jordan Rhodes, Rudy Gestede, Tom Kearney with foreign players who we'd never heard of. Then if you get the wrong manager around that group of players, and it can end disastrously. And it did for us. We got relegated in 16, 17 seasons. So I'm just starting to get those little feelings again that if we don't get this right, we could find ourselves in a bit of trouble. So the answer to your question is, when you're in that kind of crunch part of the season post-Christmas, if Rovers are down there and we are struggling and we're not having the season like we did last season, I'd much prefer to be relying on a Danny Batth or an Andi Weimann than some of these random foreign players who I've not heard of. So that's just where I think we'll find out a little bit later in the season, I think.
Yeah, see, the reason I asked about this, despite obviously people wanting the insight on these players and what they're going to do going forward, is I think it's a really interesting thing to factor into what Derby are doing right now. So, CEO Stephen Pearce spoke to BBC Radio Derby a few weeks ago and said that the kind of plan is to build, this squad and have these kind of reliable players in there. The first players that come in are probably going to be the more squad players, and I guess that's where this is about John Eustace building a solid, reliable core. I think as he frankly rebuilds most of this squad, you think the amount of loanees that were there, the amount of players that left us free, there's going to be an awful lot of turnover, and it seems that these are kind of steady, known entities to come in and anchor a squad before you perhaps move into a couple of those more exotic signings. But this is, not necessarily glamorous, but exactly what a championship team needs, some proven experience.
Yeah, and I mean, for Eustace, this is history repeating itself, isn't it? Because he took over Rovers in his first season at Rovers. It was January, February time that I think he took over, kept us up on the final day of the season, and then obviously started last season off really, really well. And he's kind of doing the same thing at Derby, isn't he? He joined you, what was it, January, February? Was it? I can't remember the month, February, March time, wasn't it? And then you've stayed up on the final day of the season. And now you've got that positivity thinking, okay, what can he go and do? And I think that description you gave there, building the core, that is absolutely what John Eustace does. And that was my reflection. He, off the pitch and on the pitch, builds a brilliant core and a brilliant culture. The previous manager that we had to John Eustace was charismatic. It was Yondell Thomason. He played sexy football and chaotic formations and was really kind of like positive in the media and all of that type of stuff. And John Eustace, in many senses, was the complete opposite. But as you say, what he did was build that really solid core that meant you can rely on that in games. And you will have seen it under Eustace now. You know, his mantra is to keep a game at 0-0 for as long as possible, or indeed go 1-0 up in a game. And that's the core that he can then rely on. If you've got a Danny Batth in the squad, if you're bringing on an Andi Weimann to see a game out, that type of approach is going to work, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's all about that and kind of building a bit of a culture as well. I mean, we saw that with the kind of fighters not victims mantra almost that became in that survival battle. I think building that tight knit core and having that bit of a siege mentality when needed, something that certainly struck me in, you know, a couple of his press conferences and things as well towards the end of last season. So I think, yeah, having these players here is proven quality. This isn't just what some people might be cautious of, given past managers and bringing in players they've worked with before. This is, you know, these are provably excellent options for the championship and will be an important component. But just in terms of people wanting to know exactly what Derby are getting, you just talk me through kind of their styles of play. So Andi Weimann obviously has been at Derby before, but I feel like it's been you know, he's not the player he was at Derby, where he was maybe a bit of a shell of what he's been elsewhere.
Yeah, I think Andi Weimann, obviously throughout his career, he's been known for his pace and blessed with pace. Now, I wouldn't say we saw that a lot at Rovers. You know, he's into his nearly mid-30s now. So what he was doing instead was just picking up cute and clever positions. So he was the only one in our squad, really, who, if a ball has come across the 6 yard box, he's fancying him there to poach it and be on the end of it and get some tap in. So his movement and his positional play is fantastic. And that's down to his experience. He'd play across all three positions in our forward line. So whether it's wide left, wide right, or through the middle, he would do all of those things for us. Or he would drop off into the pocket as well. And we had a few players that would do that. You know, Ty Dolan's one that would fit into that category, and Yuki Ohashi the same. So we had quite a fluid front line that Weimann could obviously invariably go across. And he's got an eye for goal, hasn't he? You know, the goal away at Burnley, as I say, you know, he's clearly still got a finish in him. The thing I'm going to be intrigued with Weimann for Derby is how he recovers from this knee injury. It wasn't an ACL, it wasn't anything as significant as that, but it was a knee injury that needed some surgery. So how he comes through that injury and starts with Derby, that'll just be one to watch. And whether it slows him down a little bit more post recovery from that injury, that's the only little niggle that I'd have. Is still at Rovers actually as well. Danny Batth is just your old school head everything type of centre back. So if you've got a big striker against him, if you've got balls going into the box, if you need a backline organising, Danny Batth's your man. You know, he is the one who's organising the backline, getting his head to everything. Really, really old school. Again, given his age, you know, he's 35 now. He can get turned in behind. So if there is a quick striker with clever movement, cute movement, that might be where he can be a bit exposed. But you know, with fair play to the guy, he's 35. You're going to expect that from a 35-year-old centre back. But he is the type of defender that elevates everyone else in that back line. So you've mentioned you've got a young lad at centre back. He will absolutely improve him. You know, if you've got Danny Batth alongside him, Derby fans will probably see a level of performance that you've not seen from that centre back before, because Danny Batth is a talker, he's a leader, and he just gives confidence to the back line. So they're the two. And Danny Batth, he goes up for corners. He got a couple of goals for us as well. So he is a threat from set pieces. So yeah, just a really good, well-rounded and respected championship level defender, definitely, and a good pickup for Derby, absolutely.
Yeah, as I say, feels like a great replacement for Nat Phillips, where you imagine wages have probably been a factor. I mean, I think, yeah, that increased level of performance we're going to see from Sondre Langos on multiple levels as well, because he played the last couple of months of the season with a torn meniscus, and he was still the quickest defender in that backline. He was still fairly rapid. So hopefully that counteracts maybe a little bit of the lack of pace from Bart, and then he can help him with that bit of experience and so on. So it looks to me like they slot in really well. I mean, Andi Weimann, you know, whether it's playing off somebody, dropping in to set someone up, or putting balls in when you've got, you know, Lars Jørgen Salvesen's going to be back as a big striker, and also links to Carlton Morris as well. In the last few days, we'll see what comes of that, and potentially have more for people watching on that in the coming days as well. But yeah, I think these are good options. Versatility up front as well is going to be key because we don't know whether Eustace will go to his favoured kind of 4-2-3-1 or whether he'll stick with a 3-5-2. I think to have both in his locker is going to be key. I think if Derby start with the four and end up in a bit of a bad run, then they just revert to what's seen them grind out points. And I think that pragmatism is going to be crucial. So yeah, I think two really exciting signings that will hopefully get over the line. And yeah, so it should be a great start to the window. But I'll ask you before we finish, Ryan, what are your hopes for Blackburn this season? Just to kind of get into early previews at this point. Obviously, a lot still to happen. But what are your early hopes?
Yeah, I mean, I've touched on it. It's just hopes that we don't get anywhere close to getting involved down at the bottom. We've had a couple of seasons like that where negative momentum can get you sucked in there, and thankfully we've had playoff campaigns in three out of the last four. The foreign signings are a risk. They remain a risk for me, and they're a bit random. I don't know how they're going to come together. So I think my main hope is just for a bit of a boring mediocrity season if needs be. Of course, yes, I'd love us to be punching for the playoffs. I'd love us to get promoted. All fans do. I'm operating in the real world as far as Rovers are concerned. Bart and Weimann are two quality players that we're losing, and we don't know what's coming in through the incoming door, so to speak. So yeah, just a season of not getting involved in a relegation battle, I think, is the main hope.
To be honest, I feel pretty similarly. As a minimum benchmark, let's just get stable and have a be nice to have a season where we're not panicking in the final couple of games towards, be it about relegation, promotion, playoffs, or whatever. Because apart from administration, I cannot remember the last time that happened. So yeah, bit of stability all round is probably what the doctor ordered. So yeah, Ryan, thank you very much. If you just remind us again, where can people find you? I can put some links out as well um, to follow Rovers and your coverage over the season.
Yeah, I do a weekly podcast with Elliot Jackson from the Lancashire Telegraph. So it's called the Arte Labor Podcast. So I think you can follow at Blackburn Rovers News. I think it is on X or Twitter. But you can search Arte Labor Podcast on Spotify as well. So I do that every week and write a column for him as well. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And all that's left to say is on the Rams.